The crack of gunfire echoed across the Texas plains as Lucy Sanders clutched her wedding dress, her heart pounding against her ribs like a wild Mustang. She hadn't imagined her wedding day would end with outlaws surrounding the wagon that carried her to her arranged marriage, smoke rising from the burning grassland around them, and a mysterious cowboy charging through the chaos to save her. Fort Worth, Texas, 1875. Lucy pressed her back against the wooden panels of the wagon, the white lace of her wedding gown gathering dust as she crouched lower. The sounds of men shouting and horses whinnying in panic filled the air. Her father lay unconscious at her feet, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead where one of the outlaws had struck him. The driver was already dead, slumped over the front of the wagon. Hand over the bride in the strongbox, and we might let the rest of you live. A gruff voice called out from beyond the canvas covering. Lucy's breath caught in her throat. She was supposed to be married by sundown to Jeremiah Blackwell, the wealthy rancher her father had chosen, a man 3 times her age with cold eyes and a reputation for cruelty. The strongbox contained not only her dowry but also the deed to her father's struggling ranch. Everything they had was in that box. "Please, God," she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. "Not like this." The wagon rocked as someone climbed aboard. Lucy reached for her father's revolver, her trembling fingers wrapping around the cold metal. At 22, she'd been taught to shoot since childhood, but never had she aimed at a human being. The canvas parted, and sunlight streamed in along with smoke from the prairie fire the outlaws had set to create confusion. Instead of the bearded face of an outlaw, she found herself staring into the most striking blue eyes she'd ever seen, set in a dust-covered, handsome face. "Miss Sanders." The stranger's voice was low and urgent. "Liam Tucker, I work for your father. We need to move now." Lucy hesitated, the gun still pointed at his chest. "My father never mentioned you." A bullet tore through the canvas, missing them by inches. Liam ducked, reaching for her hand. "Your father hired me 3 days ago. I've been tracking these outlaws for months. They're the Corrigan gang, and they're after more than just your dowry." Another shot rang out, splintering the wood beside them. "We don't have time for introductions," Liam said, his eyes intense. "Trust me or die here. Your choice, Miss Sanders." Lucy glanced at her unconscious father, then back to the stranger. Something in his steady gaze made her lower the gun. "What about my father? I can't leave him. I'll come back for him. First, I need to get you to safety." Liam reached behind him and pulled out a second revolver, offering it to her. "Can you use this?" Lucy took the weapon, checking it with practiced ease. "Better than most men in the territory." A ghost of a smile crossed Liam's face. "Good. When I say now, you follow me. Stay low." He peered through a tear in the canvas, assessing the situation. Lucy counted 6 outlaws circling the wagon, firing occasionally to keep anyone inside pinned down. Beyond them, she could see the orange glow of the prairie fire spreading rapidly, pushed by the wind toward them. "Now." Liam suddenly grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the back of the wagon. Lucy gathered her skirts with one hand, clutching the revolver in the other as she followed him. The moment they emerged from the wagon, chaos erupted. Liam fired 2 quick shots, dropping an outlaw who had spotted them. Lucy aimed at another who was raising his rifle and squeezed the trigger. The man fell with a cry. "This way," Liam shouted, leading her toward a dun-colored horse waiting in the tall grass. They ran, bullets kicking up dust at their heels. The smoke from the fire was growing thicker, making it difficult to breathe. Lucy coughed, stumbling as her wedding dress caught on a bramble. Liam turned, slicing through the fabric with a knife from his boot, freeing her. "My father," she cried, looking back at the wagon. "I'll get him." "Get on the horse." Liam boosted her up into the saddle. Before she could protest, he slapped the horse's flank and shouted, "Ride east. Follow the creek. I'll find you. The horse bolted, carrying Lucy away from the gunfight. She clutched the reins desperately, looking back to see Liam charging toward the wagon, firing as he went. Smoke soon obscured her view, and she turned forward, tears streaming down her face as she rode away from the only family she had left. Lucy followed the creek for nearly an hour, her wedding dress torn and dirty, her hair falling from its elaborate arrangement. The sound of hoofbeats behind her made her heart race with fear. She turned the horse into a copse of cottonwoods, drawing her revolver. "Miss Sanders." Liam's voice called out. Relief flooded through her as she recognized him, but it quickly turned to dread when she saw he was alone, riding a different horse. "My father?" she asked as he approached, already knowing the answer from the grim expression on his face. "I'm sorry." By the time I got back to him, Liam dismounted, his eyes filled with genuine regret. The fire reached the wagon. I couldn't get to him. Lucy felt the world tilt beneath her. "No, he can't be." Her knees buckled and Liam caught her before she hit the ground. She sobbed against his chest, her tears soaking into his dusty shirt. He held her awkwardly at first, then more securely, one hand gently patting her back. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I truly am." When her sobs subsided, Lucy pulled away, embarrassed by her outburst. "The outlaws." Most fled when the fire got too close. I managed to take down another one. Liam reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a canteen. "Drink. We need to keep moving. The Corrigan gang won't give up easily." Lucy accepted the water, suddenly aware of how parched her throat was. "Why are they after me? Is it just the dowry?" Liam hesitated, his gaze drifting to the horizon. "Not exactly. Have you heard of Nathaniel Corrigan, the outlaw who's been terrorizing the territory?" Lucy handed back the canteen. "Everyone knows of him. He's been looking for a wife. Apparently he saw you in Fort Worth a month ago and decided you'd be perfect." Liam's jaw tightened. "Your wedding announcement in the paper gave him the perfect opportunity to intercept you." Lucy felt sick. "So he murdered my father and our driver to take me for himself?" "Yes, madam." "That's about the size of it." Liam checked his ammunition, reloading his revolver. "We need to get to Fort Worth. I have friends there who can help us. I was supposed to be married today." Lucy looked down at her ruined dress, a hysterical laugh bubbling up. "To a man I didn't love, and now I'm running from an outlaw who wants to force me to be his wife." "Life has a strange way of changing plans," Liam replied, offering her a hand up to her horse. "But I promise you this, Miss Sanders, I won't let Corrigan or anyone else force you into anything." As Lucy took his hand, their eyes met and something unspoken passed between them. For the first time since the attack, she felt a flicker of hope. "Call me Lucy," she said softly. "Lucy," he repeated, a small smile crossing his face. "Let's ride." They traveled until dusk, staying off the main trails and keeping to the cover of trees whenever possible. Lucy learned that Liam had been a Texas Ranger before her father hired him as security for the wedding journey. He'd been tracking the Corrigan gang for months after they'd murdered his partner. "Your father was worried about the journey," Liam explained as they made camp in a sheltered ravine. There'd been rumors of the gang operating in the area. "He hired me to ride escort, but I was scouting ahead when they attacked." Lucy fed small sticks into the tiny fire Liam had built, just enough to cook the rabbits he'd snared. "He never told me. He was always protecting me, even from worry." "He spoke of you with great pride," Liam said, turning the spitted rabbits. "Said you were as capable as any son could be. Yet he was marrying me off to Jeremiah Blackwell." Lucy's voice hardened. "A man older than himself with a reputation for burying wives." Liam's expression darkened. "I didn't know it was Blackwell. He's got connections to the Corrigan gang, rumor has it." "What?" Lucy stared at him in shock. "Nothing proven, but they've never raided his property despite hitting every other ranch in the territory." Liam handed her a portion of rabbit. makes a man wonder. Lucy chewed thoughtfully, considering the implications. So my father might have been delivering me into danger unknowingly, or Blackwell might have been your father's attempt to buy protection. Liam sighed. Hard to say now. They ate in silence for a while, the weight of the day's events settling heavily on Lucy's shoulders. She had lost everything: her father, her home, her future, uncertain as it had been. "What will you do now?" Liam asked, breaking the silence. Lucy stared into the embers. "I don't know." The ranch was mortgaged to the bank. Without the deed that was in the strong box, I have no claim to it. "You have skills," Liam observed. "I saw how you handled that revolver. Not many respectable positions for women who can outshoot most men," Lucy replied with a bitter smile. "Perhaps I could join a traveling show," Liam chuckled. "Or you could help me bring down the Corrigan gang and clear your name." Lucy looked up, confused. "Clear my name? By now, word will have spread that you disappeared during an attack. Some might think you were taken. Others—" He hesitated. "Others might think I was part of it," Lucy finished, understanding dawning. "That I planned to steal my own dowry and run off." Liam nodded grimly. "Especially if Blackwell has any say in the matter. Men like him don't take rejection well, even if it wasn't your doing." Lucy felt a fresh wave of despair wash over her. "So I'm not just homeless and orphaned, but possibly a suspected criminal as well." "Only until we set things right," Liam said firmly. "I won't let your name be tarnished, Lucy. I promise you that." Their eyes met across the fire, and Lucy felt a strange flutter in her chest. This man, a stranger just hours ago, was now her only ally in a world that had turned upside down. "Why are you helping me?" she asked softly. "You fulfilled your obligation to my father." Liam's expression grew distant. "When I was a ranger, I swore an oath to protect the innocent. Badge or no badge, that oath still means something to me." He poked at the fire with a stick. "Besides, the Corrigan gang took someone from me too, my partner, my best friend." "I'm sorry," Lucy said, recognizing the pain in his eyes. "Get some sleep," Liam said, changing the subject. "I'll take first watch. We'll head out before dawn." Lucy settled onto the bedroll he'd provided, her torn wedding dress spread awkwardly around her. As she drifted toward sleep, she heard Liam humming softly a melancholy tune that spoke of loss and longing. Despite everything, she felt safe in his presence, and that realization was both comforting and terrifying. The next morning, Lucy awoke to find Liam gone. Panic seized her until she spotted a note weighted down by a stone near the cold ashes of their fire. "Gone hunting. Stay hidden. Back soon." Lucy took the opportunity to wash in the nearby stream, doing her best to clean the dirt from her skin and hair. The wedding dress was beyond salvation, torn and stained beyond recognition. She was attempting to pin up her hair when she heard a twig snap. She froze, reaching for her revolver. "Just me," Liam called softly before stepping into view. He carried a bundle under one arm. "Brought you something." He tossed the package to her. Inside, Lucy found a man's shirt, trousers, and a wide-brimmed hat. "Where did you get these?" she asked, holding up the clothing. "There's a homestead about 2 miles east. Nobody home, but laundry was hanging." Liam had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "I left some money." Lucy smiled despite herself. "A thief with principles." "I also found these," Liam added, producing a pair of worn but serviceable boots. "Might be a bit big, but better than those." He nodded toward her delicate, now ruined satin wedding slippers. "Turn around," Lucy instructed, and when he obliged, she quickly changed out of her tattered dress. The men's clothing was loose but comfortable and infinitely more practical for riding. "You can look now," she said when she was dressed. Liam turned, his eyes widening slightly. "You look scandalous," Lucy suggested, tucking her hair up under the hat. "I was going to say practical," he replied with a smile, "but there's something to be said for scandalous, too." Lucy felt a blush rising to her cheeks and quickly busied herself with rolling up the cuffs of the trousers. "What's our plan?" "We need information," Liam said, becoming serious again. "There's a trading post about half a day's ride from here. We can rest the horses, get supplies, and hopefully learn where the Corrigan gang might be headed." They broke camp quickly, leaving no trace of their presence. As they rode, Lucy found herself studying Liam when he wasn't looking. The sun had bronzed his skin, and lines at the corners of his eyes spoke of years squinting against the harsh Texas light. He wasn't conventionally handsome, but there was something compelling about his face, a quiet strength that made her feel secure. The trading post appeared on the horizon around midday, a squat, wooden building with a corral to one side and a few horses hitched outside. Liam signaled for them to stop just within the tree line. "Let me do the talking," he said. "Keep your hat low and don't speak unless necessary. With those clothes, you might pass for a young man at a distance." Lucy nodded, appreciating his concern for her reputation. A woman traveling alone with a man, dressed in men's clothing, it would be fodder for gossip at best, and at worst, might make people remember them too clearly. They approached the trading post slowly, Liam's eyes scanning for any sign of danger. 3 horses stood at the hitching post, 2 paint ponies, and a magnificent black stallion that made Lucy catch her breath. "That's a fine animal," she murmured. Liam's expression darkened. "Too fine." "That's Nathaniel Corrigan's horse." Lucy's heart skipped a beat. "Are you certain? That stallion is famous. They call him Diablo. Corrigan stole him from a Mexican general 3 years ago." Liam drew his horse to a stop. "Change of plans. We need to leave now." Before they could turn around, the door of the trading post swung open. 3 men emerged, 2 rough-looking cowboys and a tall, elegantly dressed man with a shock of red hair and a neatly trimmed beard. The latter patted the black stallion's neck possessively. "That's him," Liam whispered. "Nathaniel Corrigan himself." Lucy felt her mouth go dry. Corrigan looked nothing like she'd imagined. Rather than a rough, uncouth bandit, he had the appearance of a gentleman, dressed in a fine black coat and vest. Only the twin revolvers at his hips and the coldness in his green eyes hinted at his true nature. "Too late to run," Liam muttered as Corrigan spotted them. "Keep your head down and follow my lead." Corrigan raised a hand in greeting, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Travelers, welcome. Not many folks pass this way these days." Liam nudged his horse forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Lucy. "Just passing through, heading to Fort Worth." Corrigan's gaze lingered on Lucy, who kept her face tilted down, the wide brim of her hat concealing her features. "Your companion seems shy." "My nephew," Liam said easily. "Boy's not right in the head, doesn't talk much." One of Corrigan's men spat tobacco juice and laughed. "Looks puny for ranch work. He manages," Liam replied with a shrug. "Mind if we water our horses? Been riding since dawn." Corrigan gestured graciously toward the water trough. "Help yourselves. In fact, why not come inside? Old Jeremiah keeps a decent whiskey behind the counter." Lucy tensed at the mention of Blackwell's first name. Could this be the same Jeremiah she was meant to marry? The coincidence seemed too great. "Much obliged, but we should keep moving," Liam said, maintaining his casual demeanor despite the tension Lucy could see in his shoulders. "I insist," Corrigan said, his tone hardening slightly. "Not often we get new faces out here. I'd consider it a personal insult if you refused my hospitality." Lucy sensed rather than saw Liam's hand drift closer to his revolver. The 2 men with Corrigan had spread out slightly, their postures deceptively relaxed but their eyes alert. "One drink," Liam conceded, dismounting. He turned to Lucy. "Stay with the horses, boy. Water them good." Lucy nodded, keeping her face averted as she slid from the saddle. She busied herself with the horses, her heart pounding as Liam followed Corrigan into the trading post. One of Corrigan's men remained outside, leaning against a post and watching her with idle curiosity. As she led the horses to the water trough, Lucy kept the revolver Liam had given her within easy reach, tucked into the waistband of her borrowed trousers. She had no doubt that if Corrigan discovered her identity, both she and Liam would be in grave danger. Inside the trading post, Liam accepted a glass of whiskey from a grizzled old man behind the counter. The single room was filled with goods barrels of flour and sugar, shelves of canned foods, tools hanging from the rafters, and a glass case containing ammunition and tobacco. "To new acquaintances," Corrigan said, raising his glass. "You never did say your name, friend." "Luke," Liam replied, using an alias he'd mentioned to Lucy during their journey. "Luke Thompson." "Nathaniel Corrigan," the outlaw introduced himself with a slight bow, "though I suspect you already knew that." Liam took a sip of his whiskey, neither confirming nor denying. "Your reputation precedes you." "As does yours, Mr. Tucker," Corrigan said, his voice dropping dangerously. "Former Texas Ranger. I believe you were quite close to Jim Harker. Such a tragedy, what happened to him?" Liam's hand tensed around his glass. "You seem to have me confused with someone else." "No confusion," Corrigan replied smoothly. "And that nephew of yours out there. I'd wager my stallion that's actually Lucy Sanders under that hat. The bride that went missing yesterday when her wedding party was so unfortunately attacked." Outside, Lucy was growing increasingly anxious. Liam had been inside too long. The outlaw watching her had moved closer, his hand resting casually on his gun belt. "Mighty small hands you got there, boy," he remarked, standing just a few feet away now. "And mighty pretty, too, for someone who works a ranch." Lucy kept her head down, her pulse racing. She had two choices: maintain the ruse and hope Liam returned quickly, or make a move while she still had the element of surprise. The decision was made for her when a gunshot echoed from inside the trading post. Lucy drew her revolver in one fluid motion, firing at the surprised outlaw before he could clear his weapon. He fell backward with a cry, clutching his shoulder. Lucy didn't wait to see if he would recover. She vaulted onto her horse, grabbed the reins of Liam's mount, and positioned herself with a clear view of the trading post door, her gun ready. The door burst open and Liam backed out, his revolver aimed inside. "Lucy, ride." She kicked her horse forward, bringing Liam's mount alongside the porch. Liam leaped onto the saddle in one smooth motion as bullets splintered the wood around them. They galloped away, more shots following them as they rode. "Corrigan," Lucy shouted over the thundering hooves. "Alive." Liam called back, "But the trading post owner won't be serving any more whiskey." They rode hard for nearly an hour, finally slowing when they reached a densely wooded area where the horses could barely navigate between the trees. "He knew who we were," Lucy said as they dismounted, leading the exhausted horses deeper into the forest. "How?" Liam's face was grim. "The trading post owner was Jeremiah Blackwell's cousin. Apparently, your intended husband is indeed in business with Corrigan." "So my father was selling me to a criminal," Lucy said bitterly. "I don't think he knew," Liam replied, his voice softening. "Blackwell keeps his connections to Corrigan well hidden. Most folks think they're enemies. They found a small clearing near a spring and stopped to rest the horses." Lucy sank down onto a fallen log, the events of the past 2 days catching up with her in a rush of exhaustion and grief. "I killed a man," she said quietly, staring at her hands. Liam sat beside her. "You wounded him, and you had no choice." "There's always a choice," Lucy whispered. "My father taught me that, but I don't regret it. I would do it again to protect myself, to protect you." Their eyes met, and Lucy was struck by the tenderness in Liam's gaze. Without thinking, she reached out and touched his face, her fingers brushing against a scratch on his cheek from their hasty escape. "You're hurt," she said. "It's nothing," Liam replied, his voice rougher than usual. He caught her hand in his, holding it for a moment before gently releasing it. "We need to keep moving. Corrigan will be after us now, and he knows we're heading for Fort Worth." Lucy nodded, withdrawing her hand reluctantly. "Then we should go in a different direction." "We need allies," Liam said, standing and checking his weapons. "And the only people I trust are in Fort Worth. We'll just have to be smarter about how we get there." They traveled for the rest of the day, keeping to the forests and creek beds where their tracks would be harder to follow. By nightfall, they had reached the foothills of a small mountain range. Liam found a cave that offered shelter and a defensible position. As they settled in for the night, Lucy finally asked the question that had been nagging at her. "What happened back at the trading post? Did Corrigan recognize you?" Liam was silent for a long moment, staring into the small fire he had built near the mouth of the cave. "He knew who I was, said he'd been expecting me ever since he killed my partner." "Jim Harker," Lucy remembered. "He mentioned that name." "Jim and I had been tracking the Corrigan gang for months," Liam explained, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. "We were close, too close. They ambushed us outside of Lerdo. Jim took 3 bullets meant for me." His hands clenched into fists. "I've been hunting Corrigan ever since, badge or no badge." Lucy moved closer, placing her hand over his clenched fist. "I'm sorry about your friend." Liam's fingers slowly relaxed, turning to intertwine with hers. "Corrigan will keep coming. He wants you, and he wants me dead." "Then we'll face him together," Lucy said with a determination that surprised even her. "I'm tired of men deciding my fate. My father, Blackwell, Corrigan, they all thought they could control me, own me. No more." Liam studied her face in the flickering firelight. "You're something special, Lucy Sanders." The way he said her name sent a warmth through her that had nothing to do with the fire. They sat in companionable silence, hands still joined, until Liam reluctantly pulled away to check the horses one last time before they slept. That night, Lucy dreamed of her father. Not as she'd last seen him, bloodied and unconscious in the wagon, but as he'd been when she was a child, strong, smiling, teaching her to ride her first pony. In the dream, he cupped her face in his weathered hands and said, "Follow your heart, little one. It won't lead you astray." She woke with tears on her cheeks, but a strange sense of peace in her heart. Liam was already awake, watching the sunrise from the mouth of the cave. "Bad dreams?" he asked softly when he noticed she was awake. "Good ones, actually," Lucy replied, stretching. "About my father. He'd be proud of you," Liam said. "Most women would have fallen apart after what you've been through." Lucy smiled slightly. "Most women haven't spent their lives on a Texas ranch learning to be tough." They broke camp quickly and continued their journey, now heading southeast instead of directly east toward Fort Worth, hoping to throw off any pursuers. The day was hot, the Texas sun beating down mercilessly. By mid-afternoon, both riders and horses were exhausted. "There's a stream up ahead," Liam said, pointing to a line of cottonwood trees in the distance. "We can rest there a while." As they approached the stream, Lucy noticed smoke rising from beyond the trees. "Someone's there," she warned. Liam drew his revolver. "Stay behind me." They approached cautiously, leading the horses through the trees. On the bank of the stream sat a weathered wagon, a small cook fire burning beside it. An elderly man looked up as they emerged from the trees, his wrinkled face breaking into a smile beneath his white beard. "Travelers," he called cheerfully. "Come, come, water's good here and I've got coffee brewing." Liam hesitated, scanning the area for signs of a trap. Seeing none, he nodded to Lucy and they approached, still wary. "Name's Josiah," the old man said, extending a gnarled hand to Liam. "Josiah Winters." Traveling preacher. Luke Thompson, Liam replied, using his alias again as he shook the man's hand. And this is. He hesitated. His brother Lee, Lucy supplied, deepening her voice slightly. She was still dressed in men's clothing, her hair tucked under her hat. Josiah's eyes twinkled with amusement, but he said nothing about her obvious disguise. Well, Luke and Lee, you're welcome to share my fire and my coffee. Not much else to offer, I'm afraid. They watered their horses and accepted cups of surprisingly good coffee from the preacher. As they rested, Josiah regaled them with stories of his travels throughout the territory, preaching to anyone who would listen. Heading to Fort Worth myself, he mentioned casually. Annual gathering of Methodist preachers. Bit late, but the Lord's work doesn't always keep to man's schedule. Lucy and Liam exchanged glances. A traveling preacher heading to Fort Worth might provide the perfect cover. We're bound for Fort Worth ourselves, Liam said cautiously. Been having some trouble with outlaws on the trail. Ah, the Corrigan gang, no doubt, Josiah nodded knowingly. They've been plaguing these parts for months. Word is there after some runaway bride. Poor girl's father was killed in the attack, they say. Lucy tensed, and Liam placed a warning hand on her arm. What else have you heard? Liam asked. Josiah sipped his coffee thoughtfully. Strange business, that. Some say the bride was in on it, planned to steal her own dowry and run off. Others say Nathaniel Corrigan himself wants her for a wife. The old man shook his head. Either way, there's a reward for information about her whereabouts. Dead or alive, the poster says. Lucy felt sick. Who's offering the reward? If Josiah noticed the higher pitch of her question, he didn't comment. Jeremiah Blackwell, wealthy rancher, was supposed to be the groom, I understand. What kind of man puts a bounty on his own bride? Lucy muttered, forgetting to disguise her voice. Josiah's eyes crinkled with kindness as he looked directly at her. The kind of man no woman should have to marry, miss. Lucy froze, realizing her mistake. Liam's hand moved to his gun. The old preacher held up his hands. No need for that, young man. Your secret's safe with me. I may be old, but my eyes still work fine. Recognized a woman in men's clothing the moment you stepped into the clearing. How do we know we can trust you? Liam demanded. You don't, Josiah replied simply, but I've never had much use for men like Blackwell or Corrigan. Men who think they can buy and sell people, especially women. He looked at Lucy with grandfatherly concern. I'm guessing you're the bride in question. After a moment's hesitation, Lucy nodded. Lucy Sanders. Well, Miss Sanders, I'd be honored to help you and your protector reach Fort Worth safely. Josiah smiled. My wagon isn't much, but it might provide better cover than 2 riders out in the open. Liam and Lucy conferred privately and decided to accept the preacher's offer. They concealed their horses in a thicket, planning to retrieve them later, and climbed aboard Josiah's wagon. Lucy changed back into her tattered wedding dress, which Josiah had tactfully suggested might be less conspicuous than men's clothing if they were stopped and questioned. The wagon rolled slowly along the trail, Josiah occasionally breaking into hymns in a surprisingly strong baritone. His cheerful demeanor was infectious, and Lucy found herself relaxing for the first time in days. As the afternoon waned, Liam kept a vigilant watch from beneath the canvas covering. Something doesn't feel right, he murmured to Lucy. We haven't seen anyone on the trail all day. Perhaps the news of the Corrigan gang has kept people home, Lucy suggested. Liam shook his head. Or they're waiting for us up ahead. The wagon rounded a bend in the trail, and Josiah suddenly pulled the horses to a stop. Oh my, he said softly. Lucy peered out from behind the canvas. The trail ahead was blocked by 5 mounted men, their faces obscured by bandanas, rifles resting casually across their saddles. Afternoon, preacher, the central figure called. Mind if we take a look at your cargo? Josiah's friendly demeanor didn't waver. Just my personal belongings, gentlemen. Bibles, mostly. On my way to Fort Worth for a preaching convention. We heard you might be carrying more valuable goods, the man replied, nudging his horse forward. A woman, perhaps. Blonde, pretty, answers to the name of Lucy Sanders. Lucy shrank back, her heart pounding. Liam drew his revolver, positioning himself between her and the front of the wagon. I'm traveling alone, Josiah called back. Feel free to look if you don't believe me. The leader signaled, and two men dismounted, approaching the wagon with their rifles raised. Now, Liam whispered to Lucy, pointing to a small hole he'd cut in the canvas on the opposite side from where the outlaws approached. Lucy slipped through the opening, dropping silently to the ground beneath the wagon. She crawled through the dust, keeping the wagon between herself and the outlaws, until she reached a boulder beside the trail. Peering around it, she watched in horror as the outlaws reached the wagon. A sudden shot rang out, then another. One of the outlaws fell. Liam burst from the front of the wagon, firing rapidly. Josiah had produced a shotgun from beneath his seat and was firing at the mounted men. Lucy drew her revolver, steadying her aim against the boulder, and fired at an outlaw who was taking aim at Liam. Her bullet struck true, and the man toppled from his saddle. The air filled with smoke and the thunder of gunfire. Lucy continued firing, changing position after each shot to avoid return fire. Through the chaos, she saw Liam engaged in hand-to-hand combat with one of the dismounted outlaws, their guns forgotten as they grappled in the dust. The leader of the outlaws spurred his horse directly toward the wagon. To Lucy's horror, she realized he had spotted her. She fired, but missed as his horse leaped over the boulder where she had taken cover. The man dismounted in one fluid motion, grabbing her before she could reload. His bandana had slipped, revealing a face Lucy recognized from wanted posters: Victor Corrigan, Nathaniel's younger brother. "Got you now, bride," he snarled, dragging her toward his horse despite her struggles. Lucy fought with everything she had, kicking and clawing. Her hand found the knife in her boot. Liam had insisted she carry it, and she plunged it into Victor's thigh. He howled in pain, releasing her long enough for her to break free and run toward the wagon. She heard hoofbeats behind her and knew Victor was pursuing her on horseback. Ahead, Liam had dispatched his opponent and turned just in time to see her running, Victor closing in fast behind her. With a roar of anger, Liam charged toward them, firing his revolver. Victor's horse reared, throwing its rider. Lucy dove to the ground as bullets whistled overhead. When she looked up, Liam and Victor were locked in combat, rolling in the dust, each struggling for dominance. Victor was larger, but Liam fought with the desperate intensity of a man with everything to lose. They exchanged brutal blows, neither gaining the upper hand. Lucy searched frantically for a weapon, her revolver lost in her flight. She spotted Josiah's shotgun lying in the dust where the old preacher had dropped it after being wounded. Grabbing it, she checked the chambers. One shell remained. Victor had pinned Liam to the ground, a knife raised to deliver a killing blow. Lucy aimed the shotgun. "Victor," she shouted. He turned, his eyes widening at the sight of the shotgun aimed at his chest. Lucy pulled the trigger. The blast knocked Victor backward off of Liam. He lay motionless in the dirt, a crimson stain spreading across his chest. Lucy dropped the shotgun, rushing to Liam, who was struggling to sit up, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. "Are you all right?" she asked, helping him to his feet. "I'll live," he grunted, leaning heavily on her. "Josiah." They turned to the wagon, where the old preacher sat slumped against the driver's seat, clutching his shoulder where a bullet had grazed him. "Just a scratch," Josiah called weakly, attempting a smile. "The Lord wasn't ready for me just yet." Lucy helped Liam to the wagon, then tended to Josiah's wound, binding it with strips torn from her already ruined wedding dress. All around them lay the bodies of the outlaws. Only one had escaped, galloping away when the tide of battle turned. "He'll report to Nathaniel," Liam said grimly, watching the dust cloud disappear in the distance. "We need to move. Now." They salvaged what weapons and ammunition they could from the fallen outlaws, then continued toward Fort Worth, pushing the tired horses as hard as they dared. Josiah, despite his wound, insisted on driving. "Been through worse," the old man said cheerfully. "Got shot by Comanches in '58, stabbed by a drunk in Dallas in '62, and survived my late wife's cooking for 30 years. His resilient spirit lifted their own, but the mood in the wagon remained tense. They had defeated this group of outlaws, but Nathaniel Corrigan would soon know exactly where they were headed and who they were with. As the sun began to set, they made camp in a defensive position, a small hill that gave them a clear view in all directions. Liam insisted on taking the first watch despite his injuries. Lucy sat beside him as Josiah slept, gently cleaning the cut above his eye. "You could have been killed today," she said softly. "So could you," Liam replied, wincing slightly as she dabbed at the wound. "Why are you doing this, Liam?" Lucy asked, her hands pausing in their work. "This isn't just about your promise to my father anymore, is it? Or even about avenging your partner?" Liam was silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the distant horizon. Finally, he turned to look at her, his gaze intensely blue in the fading light. "No," he admitted. "It's not just about that anymore." Lucy's heart quickened at the emotion in his voice. "Then what is it about?" Instead of answering with words, Liam leaned forward and kissed her gently. His lips were warm and surprisingly soft against hers. Lucy froze in surprise, then melted into the kiss, her hands moving to frame his face. When they parted, Liam rested his forehead against hers. "I've never met anyone like you, Lucy Sanders. You're the bravest, most determined woman I've ever known." Lucy smiled, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "And you're the most honorable man I've ever met, Liam Tucker." From his bedroll, Josiah gave a theatrical cough. "If you two lovebirds are finished, some of us are trying to sleep over here." Lucy and Liam broke apart, laughing softly. But their hands remained entwined as they kept watch over the darkening Texas landscape, both aware that something fundamental had changed between them, something that made their dangerous journey suddenly worth every risk. They reached the outskirts of Fort Worth 2 days later, having encountered no further trouble on the trail. The city sprawled before them, a bustling frontier town with wooden buildings lining wide, dusty streets. "We need to be careful," Liam warned as they approached. "Corrigan likely has men watching every road into town. Not to mention the bounty on my head," Lucy added grimly. She had resumed her male disguise, once again dressed in the borrowed men's clothing with her hair tucked beneath a hat. Josiah stroked his beard thoughtfully. "I have a friend here, Martha Wilcox. Runs a boarding house on the edge of town. Good woman, discreet. She might give you shelter while you figure out your next move." They decided to enter Fort Worth separately. Josiah would drive the wagon in directly, playing his role as a traveling preacher. Liam and Lucy would circle around and enter on foot after dark, meeting Josiah at Martha's boarding house. As they prepared to part ways, the old preacher took Lucy's hand in his gnarled one. "You're a remarkable young woman, Lucy Sanders. Your father would be proud of the courage you've shown." Lucy felt tears sting her eyes. "Thank you, Josiah, for everything." The old man turned to Liam. "Take care of her, Ranger. She's a rare one." "I know," Liam replied, his eyes meeting Lucy's with an intensity that made her breath catch. They watched as Josiah's wagon rumbled toward town, then circled around to approach from the south. As darkness fell, they made their way cautiously through the outskirts of Fort Worth, keeping to the shadows. Martha Wilcox's boarding house was a well-kept two-story building set back from the main street. Lights glowed warmly in the windows, and the smell of fresh bread wafted from the kitchen. Josiah met them at the back door, ushering them quickly inside. Martha proved to be a stout, no-nonsense woman with kind eyes and a determined set to her jaw. She listened to their story without interruption, then nodded decisively. "Any enemy of Jeremiah Blackwell is a friend of mine," she declared. "That man ruined my sister's life. I'd be happy to help bring him down a peg." She provided them with a small room at the back of the house, accessible via a separate staircase that would allow them to come and go unnoticed by the other boarders. The room contained a single bed, a washstand, and little else. "Sorry for the tight quarters," Martha apologized, "but it's the only room not currently occupied." "It's perfect," Lucy assured her. "Thank you." After Martha left, Lucy and Liam stood awkwardly in the small space, both acutely aware of the single bed. "I'll sleep on the floor," Liam said immediately. Lucy bit her lip. "There's no need. We're both adults, and after what we've been through together." Liam's eyes darkened. "Lucy, if I share that bed with you, sleeping is not what I'll be thinking about." The frankness of his admission sent heat coursing through her. "And if I told you I'd be thinking the same thing," Liam stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper, "then I'd say we should wait until we're free of this danger, until I can court you properly, the way you deserve." Lucy placed her hand on his chest, feeling his heart race beneath her palm. "And if I told you I might not want to wait? That life is too uncertain, too precious to waste a single moment." Liam's resolve visibly weakened. He cupped her face in his hands, studying her with an intensity that made her knees weak. "Are you certain, Lucy, once we cross this line?" "I've never been more certain of anything," she whispered, rising on her tiptoes to press her lips to his. The kiss quickly deepened, years of loneliness and days of shared danger fueling a passion neither could deny. Liam's hands tangled in her hair as he backed her gently toward the bed. Lucy tugged at his shirt, desperate to feel his skin against hers. They came together with a tenderness that belied the urgency of their desire, each touch a promise, each kiss a vow. In the small room above Martha Wilcox's boarding house, Lucy Sanders and Liam Tucker found in each other a love neither had dared to hope for, a love born of danger and courage, of respect and admiration. Afterward, as they lay entwined beneath the thin blanket, Liam traced lazy patterns on Lucy's bare shoulder. "When this is over," he murmured, "when Corrigan and Blackwell are brought to justice, what will you do?" Lucy propped herself up on one elbow, studying his face in the dim light. "I don't know. My father's ranch is lost to me now. I have no home, no family." "You could have a home with me," Liam said quietly, "if you wanted." Lucy's heart soared at his words, but she kept her expression serious. "Are you proposing to me, Liam Tucker, after knowing me less than a week?" A slow smile spread across his face. "I suppose I am. Seems to me some things you just know, Lucy. And I knew from the moment you pointed that revolver at me in your father's wagon that you were someone special." Lucy laughed softly. "Not the most romantic beginning to a courtship." "But fitting for us, don't you think?" Liam pulled her closer. "We're not exactly conventional people." "No," Lucy agreed, resting her head on his chest. "We're not. And yes, Liam, when this is over, I would very much like to make a home with you, wherever that might be." They fell asleep in each other's arms, the dangers they faced momentarily forgotten in the warmth of newfound love. The next morning, Liam left early to meet with his contacts in Fort Worth, former rangers and lawmen who might help them bring down Corrigan and Blackwell. Lucy remained at the boarding house with Josiah, helping Martha with chores to pass the time and keep her mind off the dangers Liam might be facing. "You love him, don't you?" Martha asked as they kneaded bread dough side by side in the kitchen. Lucy didn't pretend to misunderstand. "Is it that obvious?" Martha smiled knowingly. "Only to someone who's seen real love before. It's in the way you look at him, the way your body turns toward his whenever he's near." She sighed. "My Henry and I were like that, 30 years together before the fever took him." "I'm sorry," Lucy said softly. Martha waved away her sympathy. "Don't be. I had 3 decades of happiness with a good man, more than many women get." She gave Lucy a sidelong glance. "Your Liam seems a good man, too." "The best I've ever known," Lucy replied, her hands working the dough with more force than necessary as worry for him gnawed at her. The back door opened, and Lucy's head snapped up, hope flaring in her chest. But it was only Josiah, returning from his errand to the Methodist church. "No sign of Liam?" he asked, noting Lucy's expression. She shook her head, trying to quell the fear rising within her. "He should have been back by now." Josiah patted her shoulder reassuringly. "Have faith, my dear. That man has survived too much to be taken down easily." But as the day wore on with no sign of Liam, Lucy's worry turned to dread. By evening, she was pacing the small room they shared, unable to sit still. "I'm going to look for him," she announced to Josiah and Martha. "That's exactly what Corrigan would expect," Martha warned. "You'd be walking right into his hands." "I can't just wait here," Lucy cried, her composure finally breaking. "What if he's hurt? What if they've captured him?" Josiah stroked his beard thoughtfully. "Perhaps there's a way to find out without exposing yourself." "Martha, doesn't Sheriff Taylor owe you a favor after you nursed his wife through that bout of pneumonia last winter?" Martha's eyes lit up. "Indeed he does. I could ask him to discreetly inquire about any strangers who might have been arrested or injured today." The plan was set in motion, and Martha left for the sheriff's office. Lucy resumed her pacing, jumping at every sound from the street below. An hour later, Martha returned with grave news. "Sheriff Taylor says a man fitting Liam's description was seen being forced into a wagon outside the Silver Dollar Saloon this afternoon. Witnesses report the wagon belonged to Jeremiah Blackwell." Lucy's blood ran cold. "Blackwell has him. Where would he take him?" "To his ranch, most likely," Martha replied. "It's about 10 miles north of town." "Then that's where I'm going," Lucy said, reaching for her borrowed hat. Josiah caught her arm. "Not alone, you're not, and not without a plan." They spent the next hour formulating a strategy. Martha would remain at the boarding house as their contact in town. Josiah, despite his age and injury, insisted on accompanying Lucy to Blackwell's ranch. "I may be old," he declared when Lucy protested, "but I can still ride and shoot. Besides, you'll need someone to perform the wedding ceremony when we rescue that young man of yours." Lucy smiled despite her fear. "Let's focus on the rescue first, Josiah." They set out at dawn, Lucy once again dressed in men's clothing, her hair tucked beneath her hat. She had strapped on Liam's spare gun belt, which he had left at the boarding house. The weight of the revolver against her hip was reassuring. Josiah had procured horses from a friend, as well as detailed directions to Blackwell's ranch. They rode north out of Fort Worth, keeping to less traveled paths to avoid detection. As they rode, Josiah filled Lucy in on what he had learned about Blackwell from Martha. Seems he wasn't always wealthy. Built his fortune on stolen cattle and land, grabbed from smaller ranchers who mysteriously disappeared or died under suspicious circumstances. Your father might not have known the extent of his crimes. Blackwell maintains a respectable facade in town. "And his connection to Corrigan?" Lucy asked. "Partners, according to Martha. Corrigan does the dirty work. Blackwell provides protection through his political connections." Josiah shook his head disgustedly. A tidy arrangement. They reached the outskirts of Blackwell's property by mid-morning. The ranch was enormous, spreading across the rolling hills as far as the eye could see. A large, white-painted house stood on a rise, surrounded by outbuildings and corrals. Armed men patrolled the perimeter. "Looks more like a fortress than a ranch," Josiah muttered as they observed from the cover of a stand of oak trees. Lucy studied the layout, her mind racing. There, she pointed to a small building set apart from the others, with a guard stationed outside. That must be where they're holding Liam. Quite possibly, Josiah agreed. But how do we get past all those guards? Lucy's gaze fell on a wagon approaching the ranch from the main road, a supply wagon, heavily loaded and driven by a single man. "I have an idea," she said, a determined glint in her eye. 20 minutes later, the supply wagon driver lay bound and gagged behind a thicket, while Josiah had donned the man's hat and coat. Lucy concealed herself beneath a tarp in the back of the wagon, surrounded by sacks of flour and beans. They approached the ranch slowly. Josiah hunched over to disguise his appearance. The guard at the gate barely glanced at the familiar wagon before waving them through. Once inside the perimeter, Josiah drove directly toward the small building they had identified as a possible holding place for Liam. He pulled the wagon to a stop beside it, blocking the view from the main house. "Supplies for the prisoner," he called to the guard in a gruff voice. The guard frowned. "Ain't expectin' no supplies. Orders from Mr. Blackwell himself," Josiah replied confidently. "Said the prisoner needs to be kept alive for questioning." The guard hesitated, then shrugged. "All right, but be quick about it." As the guard turned to unlock the door, Lucy slipped from beneath the tarp, Liam's revolver already in her hand. She brought the butt of the gun down on the guard's head with precision, catching him as he fell to avoid noise. Josiah quickly bound and gagged the unconscious man, dragging him into the shadow of the wagon. Lucy took the keys and unlocked the door, her heart pounding with fear and hope. The interior of the small building was dim, lit only by a single barred window. A figure lay slumped on a cot against the far wall. "Liam," Lucy whispered, rushing to his side. He lifted his head weakly, his face bruised and bloodied. Recognition dawned in his swollen eyes. "Lucy, what the hell are you doing here?" "Rescuing you, apparently," she replied, quickly examining his injuries. His face was battered, and he winced when she helped him sit up, suggesting bruised or broken ribs. But his eyes were clear, and the relief in them at seeing her nearly broke her heart. "You shouldn't have come," he said, even as he clutched her hand tightly. "It's too dangerous." "Did you really think I'd leave you here?" Lucy asked, helping him to his feet. "Can you walk?" Liam nodded grimly. "Not very fast, but I can manage." Josiah appeared in the doorway. "We need to move." "Someone's coming from the main house." Lucy helped Liam outside and into the back of the wagon, covering him with the tarp. She joined him, pressing a revolver into his hand. "Just in case," she whispered. Josiah climbed onto the driver's seat and flicked the reins, turning the wagon toward the gate. They had gone only a few yards when a shout rang out. "Hey, stop that wagon!" Josiah whipped the horses into a gallop, the wagon bouncing wildly over the uneven ground. Shots rang out behind them, splintering the wooden sides of the wagon. Lucy and Liam returned fire from beneath the tarp, forcing their pursuers to keep their distance. They raced toward the gate, only to find it closed and guarded by armed men. "Hold on!" Josiah yelled, driving the horses directly at the wooden gate. The wagon crashed through, wood splintering around them. They burst onto the open road, pursued by half a dozen riders. "We'll never outrun them in this wagon," Liam shouted over the thundering hooves and gunfire. Lucy spotted a fork in the road ahead. "Josiah, left fork, toward the ravine." The old preacher guided the straining horses down the left-hand path. Behind them, their pursuers split up, some following directly, others taking the right fork to cut them off. The ravine appeared ahead, a deep cut in the land with a narrow bridge spanning it. Beyond the bridge, the forest thickened, offering potential cover. "Get across the bridge, then stop just inside the tree line," Lucy called to Josiah. They thundered onto the bridge, bullets whistling around them. As soon as they reached the far side, Josiah pulled the horses to a halt. Lucy and Liam tumbled from the wagon, taking cover behind trees. "Go," Lucy shouted to Josiah. "Get the wagon into the trees and circle back to Fort Worth." The old man nodded, understanding her plan. He drove the wagon deeper into the forest as Lucy and Liam positioned themselves on either side of the path, weapons ready. The first of their pursuers reached the bridge. Lucy took careful aim and fired, not at the riders, but at the ropes supporting the ancient structure. Liam did the same from the opposite side. The bridge groaned, swayed, then collapsed just as the riders reached the middle. Men and horses plunged into the ravine with screams of terror. Those who had been following behind pulled their mounts to a halt at the edge, firing uselessly across the gap. Lucy and Liam retreated into the forest, making their way to where Josiah waited with the wagon. "That won't hold them for long," Liam said grimly. "They'll find another crossing." "Then we need to keep moving," Lucy replied, helping him into the wagon. "Back to Fort Worth. Martha knows people who can help us bring Blackwell and Corrigan to justice." They traveled for the rest of the day, taking back roads and trails to avoid detection. By nightfall, they had reached the outskirts of Fort Worth. But instead of heading directly to Martha's boarding house, Josiah turned the wagon toward the sheriff's office. "What are you doing?" Lucy asked, alarmed. "Trust me," the old preacher replied with a wink. To Lucy's surprise, Sheriff Taylor himself emerged from the office as they approached, accompanied by several deputies and a distinguished-looking man in an Eastern suit. "Right on time, Josiah," the sheriff called. "Is that our witness?" Lucy looked at Josiah in confusion. The old man smiled. "Allow me to introduce Judge Harold Finnegan of the Federal Circuit Court. He's been investigating Blackwell and Corrigan for months." The distinguished man stepped forward, extending his hand to Liam. "Ranger Tucker, it's good to see you alive, though you look like you've been through hell." "You know each other?" Lucy asked, bewildered. "Judge Finnegan recruited me specifically to gather evidence against Corrigan and Blackwell," Liam explained, wincing as he shook the judge's hand. "My retirement from the Rangers was just a cover." Lucy stared at him, a mixture of relief and indignation washing over her. "You never told me." "I couldn't risk it," Liam replied apologetically. "The fewer people who knew, the safer the operation. I never expected to." He trailed off, his eyes conveying what he couldn't say in front of the others. "To fall in love," Lucy finished softly. The judge cleared his throat. "I hate to interrupt, but we need to move quickly. Blackwell and Corrigan will realize their prisoner has escaped and likely try to flee the territory." Sheriff Taylor nodded. "We have men positioned at Blackwell's ranch and at all known Corrigan hideouts, but we need your statements first." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Lucy and Liam gave detailed statements about everything that had happened since the attack on the wedding wagon. Judge Finnegan listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "With your testimony and the evidence Ranger Tucker has already gathered, we have more than enough to arrest both Blackwell and Corrigan," the judge announced when they had finished. "Miss Sanders, I must commend your bravery throughout this ordeal." Lucy smiled tiredly. "I just want it to be over." "It soon will be," Sheriff Taylor assured her. "We've received word that Blackwell is holed up at his ranch, and Corrigan has been spotted heading this way with a large group of his men. Apparently, he's planning one last attempt to capture you." Liam's hand tightened around Lucy's. Then let's end this, once and for all. Despite his injuries, Liam insisted on being part of the force assembled to confront Corrigan. Lucy, refusing to be left behind, was stationed with Martha and Josiah in a room above the general store, which offered a clear view of the main street. "He'll come at dawn," Liam had told her before leaving to join the sheriff's men. "Corrigan always attacks at dawn." As the first light of morning touched the eastern sky, Lucy stood at the window, watching the empty street below. Martha handed her a cup of coffee, her kind face concerned. "He'll be all right," the older woman said softly. "That man has too much to live for to die today." Lucy smiled gratefully. "I hope you're right." The sound of approaching horses broke the dawn silence. Lucy counted at least 20 riders entering the far end of the main street, led by a figure on a magnificent black stallion, Nathaniel Corrigan himself. "They're here," she whispered. Below, the street appeared deserted. But Lucy knew that behind the facades of shops and behind water troughs and barrels, Sheriff Taylor's men and Liam waited, weapons ready. The riders advanced slowly down the center of the street, alert for any sign of a trap. When they reached the midpoint, Sheriff Taylor stepped out from the doorway of the bank, a shotgun in his hands. "Nathaniel Corrigan," he called out, "you and your men are surrounded. Throw down your weapons and surrender." For a moment, nothing happened. Then Corrigan laughed, the sound carrying clearly in the morning air. "Surrounded, are we?" he called back. "I don't see anyone but you, Sheriff, and we both know you're not enough to stop me." As if on cue, armed men appeared in windows and doorways all along the street. Liam stepped out from behind a water trough, his revolver aimed steadily at Corrigan despite his injuries. "It's over, Corrigan," Liam shouted. "Blackwell has already been arrested. You have nowhere to run." Corrigan's expression darkened at the news of Blackwell's capture. His eyes scanned the buildings, stopping on the window where Lucy stood watching. "There she is," he said, his voice carrying clearly. "My bride." Lucy felt a chill run down her spine at his possessive tone. "She was never yours," Liam replied coldly, "and she never will be." Corrigan's face twisted with rage. "Then no one will have her." He raised his revolver and fired directly at the window where Lucy stood. Martha pulled her down just as the glass shattered above their heads. The street erupted in gunfire. Lucy crawled to the broken window, peering cautiously over the sill. Below, chaos reigned. Corrigan's men were engaged in a desperate firefight with the sheriff's forces. Bodies lay in the dust as both sides took casualties. Through the smoke and confusion, Lucy saw Liam advancing steadily toward Corrigan, firing with deadly accuracy. The outlaw leader had dismounted and taken cover behind an overturned wagon, returning fire. "Be careful," Lucy whispered, her heart in her throat. As if he had heard her, Liam glanced up at the broken window, a brief smile crossing his face. In that moment of distraction, one of Corrigan's men took aim at him. "Liam, look out," Lucy screamed. Liam dove for cover as bullets splintered the wood where he had been standing. The outlaw who had fired fell a moment later, shot by one of the deputies. The gunfight continued for what seemed like hours but was probably only minutes. Corrigan's men, realizing they were outmatched, began to surrender or flee. Soon only Corrigan himself remained, pinned down behind the wagon. "It's over, Nathaniel," Sheriff Taylor called. "Throw out your weapon." "Never," Corrigan shouted back, his voice edged with desperation. Lucy watched in horror as Corrigan suddenly made a break for his horse, firing wildly as he ran. Liam stepped into his path, his revolver raised. "Drop it, Corrigan," Liam ordered. The outlaw leader skidded to a halt, his gun still aimed at Liam. For a heartbeat, they stood facing each other, neither man blinking. "She was supposed to be mine," Corrigan snarled. "She belongs to no one but herself," Liam replied evenly. Corrigan's finger tightened on the trigger. Liam fired first. Nathaniel Corrigan fell backward into the dust, a look of surprise on his face. His revolver discharged harmlessly into the air as his fingers reflexively contracted in death. A profound silence fell over the street. Liam stood motionless for a moment, then holstered his weapon and looked up at the window where Lucy watched. She was already running, taking the stairs two at a time, bursting out onto the street. Heedless of the curious stares of deputies and townsfolk, she ran to Liam, throwing herself into his arms. He caught her despite his injuries, holding her tightly against his chest. "It's over," he murmured into her hair. "It's finally over." Lucy pulled back just enough to look into his face, taking in the cuts and bruises, the exhaustion in his eyes, and the love that shone through it all. "Are you all right?" she asked, her hands gently framing his face. Liam smiled, wincing slightly at the cut on his lip. "I am now." 3 months later, a small crowd gathered in Martha Wilcox's garden. Roses climbed the trellises, their fragrance perfuming the air as Josiah, dressed in his finest suit, stood before the assembled guests. Lucy waited nervously inside the boarding house, peering out at the gathering through a lace curtain. Martha fussed with the simple white dress they had found in Fort Worth, adjusting the flowers in Lucy's hair. "He's waiting for you," Martha said softly, "and looking about as nervous as you are." Lucy smiled, taking a deep breath to calm her racing heart. "I never thought I'd be a bride again so soon, or that I would choose it this time." Martha squeezed her hand. "Life has a way of surprising us, my dear. Now go, before that young man thinks you've changed your mind." Lucy stepped out into the garden and the assembled guests turned to watch her approach. But she had eyes only for Liam, standing tall and handsome beside Josiah, his face healed and his eyes bright with emotion. As she reached him, he took her hands in his. "You look beautiful," he whispered. "Dearly beloved," Josiah began, his voice strong and clear. "We are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." The ceremony was brief and perfect. When Josiah pronounced them husband and wife, Liam drew Lucy into his arms, kissing her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. The small reception that followed was filled with laughter and joy. Judge Finnegan, who had become a friend during the trials of Blackwell's surviving men, raised his glass in a toast. "To Ranger Tucker and his brave wife," he declared, "without whom justice would not have been served. May your future be as bright as your courage." As the celebration continued around them, Liam led Lucy to a quiet corner of the garden. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a folded document and handed it to her. Lucy opened it, her eyes widening as she read. "This is the deed to my father's ranch." Liam nodded. "Judge Finnegan helped me recover it from Blackwell's belongings. It's yours now, ours if you want it to be." Lucy stared at the document, tears welling in her eyes. "Our home." "Is that a yes?" Liam asked, his eyes hopeful. In answer, Lucy threw her arms around his neck, the deed clutched safely in her hand. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." As the sun set over Fort Worth, casting golden light across the garden, Liam and Lucy Tucker slipped away from their own wedding celebration. They had a long journey ahead to a ranch that needed rebuilding, to a life they would create together. But for now, they had this moment and each other, and the promise of all the moments to come. A love forged in danger, sealed in courage, and destined to last a lifetime. 5 years later, Lucy sat on the porch of their ranch house, watching as Liam taught their 4-year-old son, James, to ride his first pony. Their 2-year-old daughter, Emma, played at her feet with wooden blocks. The Sanders-Tucker ranch had prospered under their care. The house that had once been partially burned during the Corrigan gang's raids was now rebuilt and expanded. Fields that had lain fallow were once again productive, and their cattle herd was one of the finest in the territory. Josiah still visited regularly, though his traveling days were mostly behind him now. He had settled in Fort Worth as the permanent pastor of the Methodist Church, but he never missed a chance to see the family he had helped bring together. As Lucy watched her husband patiently guiding their son, she reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From a bride fleeing a forced marriage to a woman who had chosen her own destiny. From a wagon surrounded by outlaws to a home surrounded by love. Liam looked up, catching her eye across the yard. The smile that passed between them held all the warmth and tenderness of their years together, and all the promise of the years to come. Their story had begun with danger and desperation outlaws surrounding a wedding wagon, a cowboy riding through smoke to claim his bride. But it had become so much more than that. It had become a testament to courage, to choice, and to a love strong enough to overcome any obstacle. As the Texas sun set behind the hills of their ranch, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Lucy Tucker knew that some journeys, no matter how difficult their beginnings, led exactly where they were meant to go. And she wouldn't change a single step that had led her here, to this moment, to this life, to this love.